list a couple of facts about the Jakelin Caal case. So you had 7-year-old baby Jakelin of Raxruha, Guatemala. She liked to climb trees. She never had a toy. She never had any shoes. She was given her first pair of shoes to make this, trek across Mexico and up the border. She gets to the American border, but she is thirsty. She isn't thirsty. I'm going to talk about the timeline specifically on that, and perhaps some other facts too. So this is the Mayan civilization. The Mayan civilization reigned the Americas along with the Incas and the Aztecs for the first 1,000 years, the first millennium AD. Then the Spanish savages arrived. So those white savages had genocided or took over the Mayans. They conquered them. Then eventually, 300 years later, or 1800 something, they get free from the Spanish. So you have 7-year-old baby Jakelin of Raxruha, Guatemala. She definitely is affected by the 1954 coup d'etat that happens, that stops a 10-year revolution and brings in a 36-year civil war. Her father is 7 years old when the 1996 treaty was signed for peace. So the 36-year civil war was caused by the United States. So 7-year-old baby Jakelin of Raxruha, Guatemala, who likes to climb trees, is going to die in the custody of Homeland Security. And Homeland Security, ironically or perhaps intentionally, closed during the Trump shutdown. Also the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Justice. Jakelin Amei Rosemary Caal Maquin is her full name. Jakelin, A-M-E-I. Amei Rosemary Caal Maquin. That's her full name. Her grandfather's name is Domingo Caal, C-A-A-L, who is 61 years of age. Her father's name is Nery Gilberto Caal, 29 years of age. Nery Gilberto. So Nery Gilberto Caal, Nery, 29 years old. He's a poor bean and corn farmer, works all day from Kansas City in the morning to Kansas City at night, but couldn't stay on his land. Had to get to the United States to be able to pay for his family. They only lived on $5 a day, just the corn during harvest time, but they hardly get any money for the corn and beans that they produced. So Jakelin Amei Rosemary Caal Maquin was very attached to her father, Nery Gilberto Caal. So 29-year-old Nery Gilberto Caal is going to walk with Jakelin across Mexico all the way up until Antelope Wells, New Mexico. And then she's going to die on the way from Antelope Wells to Lordsburg, New Mexico, which was 95 miles north of Antelope Wells. Over 9 hours after the U.S. had Jakelin in custody. So she was in U.S. custody for 9 hours. Is it possible to dehydrate, for a kid to dehydrate in 9 hours? Yeah, definitely. They could dehydrate within a day or two, and it's exacerbated by the physical activity and the temperature. That desert, that place where they crossed Antelope Wells, the temperature is 76 degrees, so it was hot. It was warm temperatures. It was about an hour and a half walk, so I don't know how come all that driving they didn't have any water up until the walk. And then when they get there, they say that they had offered it, but the way that they did this was so fucked. They give him a piece of paper saying if he needed anything, and he just kind of quickly rejected it. And so they're saying that paper is saying that he admitted that there was no health problems, that she was fine and okay, fine and dandy, and that they didn't need any water or food. Which, why would you say that if it wasn't true? And it's not clear or not whether or not the Border Patrol actually give any water or food, or they definitely didn't give any medical care. So they definitely did not give medical care. There's no medical personnel there. They made a phone call after they found out that she was vomiting, but they were more worried about arresting and handcuffing everybody and making sure they didn't run away from that little Sally Fort in Antelope Wells. It's one of the few port of entries that has very few migrants. It's known as the quit or the turn themselves in port of entry, because people walk up that mountain and they walk up that area. They're just so damn tired. They don't want to run. They just turn themselves in right at the port of entry. So they just say, okay, God, that was too hard for me. I'm not running away. And that's precisely what they turned out to do. Now, I've heard conflicting tales about whether or not the father had paid some trafficker, a human trafficker, in order to get all the way up there. So the mother, Claudia, says that they're coyotes and that he took out a loan. The only money that he owed anybody was neighbors and friends. So he took out a loan for gasoline and transportation costs, but not to pay a coyote, not to pay a trafficker. So the right wing is trying to turn this. They are happy. Tomi Lahren is so happy about this. They are beyond themselves. They're not talking about it. They're not mentioning it because this little 7-year-old girl has brown skin, just like baby Jesus would have had, right? He's born in the Middle East. Of course, he's probably black or at the very least brown, but definitely not white. Everybody agrees on that. Jesus is not white whatsoever. Jesus is definitely brown and possibly black. So the brown baby Jesus, the girl, 7-year-old baby Jesus, crossed the border, and she was in the hands of the Border Patrol, and within 9 hours, she's dead. And so, quickly, I'm going to go ahead and assign the blame, who I think is responsible, and then I'm going to get, actually, I'll just keep on reading the facts, okay? So they're poor, making $5 a day, right? They're trying to make a better life. They didn't necessarily have to make that decision. The father is culpable for that, but it's between a rock and a hard place. And ultimately, who's to blame? Is it the father? Is it the Border Patrol? It's definitely not Jakelin. Jakelin was 7 years old. She was innocent. She didn't deserve to die. So Jakelin did not deserve to die. So is it the Border Patrol? Is it the father? Is it both of them? Yes, it's both of them. So they are both to blame. We need to file charges on both of them. The father is right now Nery, N-E-R-Y, Nery. Nery is in El Paso, Texas. And Nery has a court trial coming up January the 3rd, 2018, so we're going to hear about some more information. Donald Trump has not mentioned anything. Donald Trump's policies definitely exacerbated the situation. The get tough on immigration. This is going to make Tomi Lahren and all them sons of bitches and Coulter and all them motherfuckers happy as fuck, because she's a martyr to the cause. She's a martyr to the cause of what humanity and life. But for them, for the right wing, they are okay for the children coming over here and dying. They're sitting there saying, well, you shouldn't have broke the law, right? You crossed illegally, and then your daughter died. How, fuck you, who gives a shit? Well, the daughter doesn't deserve to die. If the father is the one that broke the law, he's the one that needs to pay for the crime. For the children to come over and for us to dehydrate them to death, what bunch of fucking pussies. You got a little 7-year-old girl, and you're afraid of this little 7-year-old girl. You got to make sure she's handcuffed, and you got to, deport her to some big man's prison. You got to take her to the man's prison and then to a courthouse instead of making sure she's got food and water, and you're making sure she's handcuffed. There was one report, and it sounds plausible, that they separated her initially from the parent because Nery didn't have the proof of fatherhood. He didn't have any papers proving that he was the father of Jakelin of Nery Caal Maquin. And so since he didn't have the papers, they separated her. So they're shocked. She's going to die of dehydration, sepsis, shock, liver failure. They're trying to say don't have an official cause of death, but it seems obvious to me. I think they're trying not to say don't put it on the dehydration because the father is partially responsible, which is probably true. The father is probably responsible. That's probably true. But the Border Patrol is definitely responsible. So regardless if the father is responsible, the Border Patrol 100% has blood on their hands. There's even a report, Kevin Michaeline was testifying in Congress 4 days after it happened, and they said, is there anything we should know about? And he's like, nope, don't need nothing. So he didn't even tell Congress about the death for a week, more than a week, even Congress. Nobody knew that this death had happened. So Kevin Michaeline had covered it up. He had already, they knew about this. They've been in damage control. They're going to spend all this money in Central America. $6 billion is going to go to their immigration services. So really, I think this is just the Trump administration trying to get Guatemala, Nicaragua, and all these other Central American countries to get their immigration policies up and running so they'll catch the people running into their countries instead of just letting them just slip on through, because a lot of the right-wingers are sitting there saying, how come Mexico is allowing all these immigrants just to wander on in and go on up the border, right? Well, they're peaceful people, so I guess Mexico has realized that there's lots of poor people. They need to do what they need to do, and instead of stopping them and then having, trying to take care of them, the government trying to take care of them or spending money for prisons and whatnot, that they'll just let the natural flow of, migration happen. and they'll get to the United States, and either they'll take care of themselves, they'll get arrested, or what have you. So apparently the Mexicans do have they were calling for $30 billion. President Obrador, the president of Mexico, wanted $30 billion for this Central American fund, but it was Guatemala. So already the Trump administration is doing some things. This is damage control. They're trying to do some things to soften the blow of the death of Jakelin Caal Maquin, because they know that this is some fucking bullshit. She died of dehydration, shock, and liver failure. And that's according to the Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection Agency. So the Customs and Border Protection Agency, the CBP. They said it was dehydration, shock, and liver failure. That's a really shitty way to die. She had 2 heart attacks. They found out that her shock, right? So shock, her entire organs and her body just got scared and just started. For a child dying of dehydration, one by one, the organs of the body began to blinker and collapse. The heart, for hours, racing faster and faster to compensate for a lack of blood volume, is now a choking pump. The tissues are starved of oxygen. The blood itself becomes acidic. Membrane pumps fail, and cells everywhere begin to burst. The kidneys are overrun. The lungs fail, and the brain, most desperately relying on oxygen of all, begins to seize. So let's get to the timeline. The timeline, she's going to reach America December 6th. December 6th, 9:15 p.m. So she gets here in the evening at 9:15 p.m. That's what, prime time in the evening. So 9:15, December 6th. She had started walking 90 minutes. So Jakelin and Nery, her father, and the group that they were traveling with, because they're going to be with 163. So there's 163 total. They're with 161 other migrant crossers. So this is kind of a caravan. I don't know if this is funded by George Soros or not, but I'm sure the right-wing lunatic fringe might suggest so. So it would be interesting to see if there is somebody financing all this, but it looks like he financed it himself by putting his farm up for mortgage and then, for collateral, and then got money for that. And land is the only thing that's of any value in Guatemala, so for them to do that is huge. So essentially he just got a loan from his land and then used it. I mean, I don't know how much, what, $500? How much gas money would you really need to travel that distance on a, bus or train or airplane or bicycle? I guess we'd have to. So anyways, the forward operating base bounds. So it's close to the Antelope Wells port of entry. The POE is what the Border Patrol calls it. This large group was apprehended by 3 Border Patrol agents. Eventually, I'm going to hear 4 Border Patrol agents were on duty. So is it 3? Is it 4? Did one come up? When did that other one come up? I want to know the specific details. None of these Border Patrol agents have said shit to the press. They're keeping their mouths shut. They're in damage control. So they think they're smart by covering their own asses. But we need to file charges on everybody that's responsible for Jakelin's death. This is an international incident, so to make sure, let's, do this thing right. So let's put charges on everybody that could possibly be responsible, the 4 Border Patrol agents and the father. So that's 5 people that we're going to charge with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and then see where the chips fall where they may. Let's trust our judicial branch. It's not a docket slaughterhouse. Of course, we will get justice and fairness out of our own criminal justice system, especially if the Border Patrol agents are required to go through it just like anybody else. They are responsible for the death of Jakelin. They're responsible. They finished her off. So whether it was intentional, whether it was by negligence, they finished her off. They got her into custody for 9 hours. It's possible that they could have dehydrated her by themselves. 9 hours, she just did this walk, right? He could have given her fluid or water the entire time. As soon as they get into the deportation prison, then they're not given any water or food for 9 hours, and then she's puking and vomiting, and then she's not breathing, and then it's too late. So 9 hours after they capture her, baby Jakelin is going to die in their custody. So this is how the Border Patrol people, the Department of Homeland Security, they had put it that, okay, so 7:45 is when they're dropped dropped off. 7:45, an hour and a half later, is 9:15. December 6, 2018, 9:15. The 7-year-old Guatemalan minor and her father were apprehended with a group of 163 aliens, like the buggers, like the Iranian invasion, because of the Oumuamua satellite, the Oumuamua missile, that the Iranians almost drew first blood with the Oumuamua missile. So 3 Border Patrol agents grab hold 163, or they turn themselves in, right? Because if 3 people can't hold 163 people, these are folks who are peaceful. Their hands are up, and they said, go ahead and take us where you need to take us. So they are not running away. Somebody had said that the asylum wasn't the part of the plan. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but when they eventually got there, the asylum became the plan. So I don't believe, it didn't seem like there's a trafficker. There could be, but he's not trying to get through and find a city and find some family inside of America, because they're stopping at the port of entry, the Antelope Wells port of entry in New Mexico. So there's 161 other migrants, other illegals. They walked through the Bootheel Desert, grouped near Camp Bounds on the night of December 6, 2018. She was at the base for, when they finally get there, they're going to put some form in front of the father. And this is all the right-wingers who go ahead and defend the Border Patrol people as if they did nothing wrong. They're acting guilty. They're not talking to the media. They're not talking to the press. We pay you our tax dollars. You need to make sure you're a good official. You can't just be a fascist piece of shit beating up people, and then eventually a little girl dies, and then you're going to pretend that you're the good people, that you don't do nothing wrong? Something happened. Somebody made some mistakes. So let's let's put them in. Our judicial system works, right? Unless you're saying our judicial system's broken. They just did the criminal justice bill. So, if our criminal justice system isn't fair, it just became more fair. That's what we're led to believe. It's supposed to be a good start. So he's given this form, I-799 or some shit, and it's asking him whether or not they need medical help, food, water, and his first language is Quiche Mayan. So these are all the Mayans. These are still the Mayans standing up. Guatemala, the name of Guatemala just means the land of trees in the Mayan language. So basically, it should just be called the country of Mayans, right? But for some reason, the Mayans aren't getting their due. They're not, they're not making enough money. So, the large crowd, it took them, they said, 90 miles, right? So they can't do shit with them in Antelope Wells. They got to drive them to Lordsburg. So before the Border Patrol form was in English, they asked him the question in Spanish. His second language is Spanish, so I would think that if they asked him anything more than, do you need any medical help? Do you need any help? Do you need any food or water? If they asked any, better than that, if it looked like they were being dangerous, George Washington signed an agreement that he killed some French people in cold blood. So, when you're under duress or being coerced, what you sign isn't legal. But he does, for whatever reason, this interaction, they're using this as him saying that she had no harm, she wasn't sick, she didn't need food or water. Why would he say that? It's not clear if they got food or water. They're not answering the questions. That tells me a lot right there. They're not going to answer questions. They're not even answer the congressional delegations questions, so they're not even answering to Congress. They are the executive branch, so they just only need to answer to Donald. Donald, so far, has not made any comment about this whatsoever, but his behavior, they made the FBI sponsors, so they have all these kids that's, in El Paso, all these kids are just being put in cages, and the FBI was getting background checks, not on the sponsor of the house, but everybody inside the house, and they were able to find some illegal immigrants from that. So they want to make sure that the people who are adopting, are Americans, and they aren't somehow connected through, I guess another illegal immigrant or something. Maybe the mother or father was able to get somebody to sponsor them or some shit. Chain migration. So that's how the Germans and the Irish did it. So they're about 90 miles away. 10 p.m. So they get there at 9:15. 9:15, they round them all together. They eventually call Lordsburg, and the bus, one single bus, is going to be sent southbound at 10 p.m., 90 miles towards Antelope Wells. And then eventually it's going to get there at midnight. So it takes them 2 hours. It's only 95 miles away. So if they drove 5 miles an hour, if they drove 60 miles an hour, if they drove more than 60 miles an hour for the majority of the way, it should only take an hour, for 60 miles, so it only should have took an hour and a half. So for whatever reason, the bus takes 2 hours to get there. It leaves at 10 p.m., gets there at midnight. It's the first bus. The bus is going to take 50 kids, but not Jakelin and Nery, not our two folks. So they're going to take 50 kids who were unattached, that had no parents with them. So the first bus, which makes sense, right? So they had one bus, they filled it up with 50 kids, and then that bus went up north. And so you got Nery and Jakelin still sitting there at the port of entry or wherever the fuck the prison is in Antelope Wells, their makeshift prison. So it took 2 hours for the bus to get there and then the bus to come back, right? So you got the first bus, and then the bus returns to Bounds at 4 a.m. So at 4 a.m., the bus returns to Bounds. I heard actually they had 2 buses this time. So there was 2 buses, and then they were able to get the rest of the people because you still got, what, 50? You can't, that's not enough, right? You're going to pile people on top of one another. So they should have had 3 or 4 buses ready. And then they said there's only 3 or 4 border agents. Well, how many bus drivers? And then how many people's working at Lordsburg? So it seems like, I don't know, maybe they were there, but okay. So 5 a.m. So they get the bus. It finally comes back at 4 a.m. So you've had Jakelin and Nery just sitting there in Antelope Wells from 9:15 until 4 a.m., until 5 a.m., okay? So as she's loaded up on the bus at 5 a.m., which is, what, nearly 8 hours after the Border Patrol has captured Jakelin and Nery, she's vomiting. She's puking. She's throwing up all over the place. Then within an hour, she's going to be going into convulsions. She's going to have seizures, and then she's not going to breathe. She's going to stop breathing on this ride up to Lordsburg. So 5 a.m., December 7th, the day after. So they got there in the evening. They spent the night past midnight. Now it's 5 in the morning. Are they all still awake? Right? She could have got some sleep. Maybe if there was some comfortable settings, or did they have bright lights in her eyes? They've already said that the conditions of these places are horrendous, and they're not letting the press inside of it. And if the Iran-Contra is any indication, really they'll say there's an investigation, pretend like they're going to do shit. The press doesn't hold their feet to the fire, and we never get to the bottom of this thing. So Jakelin is vomiting as she's loaded up onto the bus to be transferred to Lordsburg, 95 miles away, which was a 2-hour drive from before. 6:30, they said, is when she gets there. She was vomiting at the beginning of the bus ride, but she's dead by the end. So after, it took 9 hours and 15 minutes from the time she was arrested and detained for her to quit breathing. After she quits breathing, they're going to try to do anything and everything, you know, fly her to El Paso and airlift her and all this other shit. But this is 9 hours after they've had her in her custody, and this is within 2 or 3 hours that she had been vomiting, and then this was within, you know, how long has she not been breathing? Was she not breathing for 1 minute? As soon as they arrived there, they said that she's not breathing. She wasn't breathing for 5, 10, 15 minutes. How long was she not breathing? And if she would have been like, hey, she's not breathing, would they have stopped and got the helicopter right then and there? And the pediatrician group is coming out. A lot of people are saying that, why would you assume that children who come across the border are these crazy invaders, right? These crazy sort of just Mexican soldiers trying to take over their land or something. That's not, these are little babies, these are kids. This is there's 163 of them, sure, but the kids, I think the kids should be easy to deal with, because what the hell they do? Just make sure that they're, you know, give them some animal crackers and some water, and give them a little cot and stuff. So I feel like it's real simple. It's simple. Or, you know, have a wall to where they can't, you know, if we really want to be that callous, have a big-ass wall to where they can't even get across, so they die on the Mexican border. But that's, you know, they're dying on that side. So it just seems to me that you have to sort everybody out. Fuck the criminals, right? The criminals, you don't want no criminals around here. The adults, you have to sort out the adults. But the children, frankly, from Guatemala and Honduras, we should take every child from Honduras and Guatemala up to the age of, I don't know, 15 or so. So any child that's innocent, that, you know, they are still able to believe in America and the American dream, and if they get up here, definitely if you're 5 years of age and younger, 7 years old, that doesn't feel like a threat to me. So 10 years of age and younger seems to be a safe bet. We'll take all kids from the Honduras and Guatemalan countries, because we meddled in their affairs and we caused a really bad refugee crisis. So because we're also causing a refugee crisis in Venezuela. So the places where we cause refugee crisis, we need to take more than our fair share of refugees in from those areas. Of course we do. So Jakelin, she's going to die, right? There's your timeline. Within 9 hours and 15 minutes into the Border Patrol's custody, there was a Hidalgo of Medical Services before you get to Lordsburg, New Mexico. So coming from Antelope Wells, I don't know why they didn't go to the Hidalgo Medical Services. So on the way up there, it's a 2-hour bus drive on the way down, and with an hour and a half on the way up. She was vomiting, so that was, if they're piling everybody in, that had been a horrible experience for everybody. She's puking, she's vomiting. They're probably holding her and trying to, her temperature is going up, and she's going into sepsis shock, and her liver is going to get swollen. She's going to go into cardiac arrest 2 times. And they're going to revive her twice. So basically, it was a zombie. They revived a zombie, and they had her breathing, but they only had her breathing for a couple times. So they go all out once she's dead. Once she's dead, they go all out. But before that, they, for 9 hours, they were the callous Nazi, right-wing fascists you would expect them to be. So they definitely need to be charged with a crime. They're definitely responsible. They are responsible for either finishing her off or causing the entire thing. She could have, starved to death or dehydrated to death within that 9-hour period that she was with the Border Patrol. She got thirsty. She walked through the desert for an hour and a half, so she was in the hot air, and so, that hour and a half perhaps you could put on the father, and the best thing you could say for the father is that only that hour and a half did she go without water, but had she not had water for a day or two, then a lot of the blame would go onto the father. So the Border Patrol, the right-wingers who want to defend anything and everything a Border Patrol agent does, what they're going to do is they're going to put it all on the father to deflect blame from the Border Patrol. And as much as I'm a bleeding heart liberal, the father is to blame. The mother is to blame. The father and the mother is to blame because they're the ones that drug her, through Mexico, and they drug her through the desert, and they said they got money for a loan, so they got money for gasoline for their transportation, but they didn't get enough, bottles of water. They didn't get enough cans of tuna, or enough canned food goods to make sure she was well fed and well hydrated on the entire time. And I'm also going to blame the Border Patrol agents. I think it's 50-50. So you probably could put, more on one or the other, but I think it's 50-50. So, the father started it, but once he's in their custody, he doesn't have much control over the situation. And then if they had separated her, it doesn't matter if he signed a damn form or not. They didn't even believe that he was the parent. So if they separated her, when the 50 kids were all together, I mean, how are you not passing out little, cups of ice cream and stuff for all the kids? Just, make it, you don't have to make it a great, fun experience, but you don't have to be a bunch of fucking psychos. I can understand just basically if the nation is your land and your country and you got 163 people coming up on your land and there's only 4 of you, yeah, it's scary. But once you get everything settled, once you get everybody settled, and then you're getting these buses and you're getting everybody, I mean, the kids, give them some bottles of water. What it costs like $10 for 100 bottles of water. So you had 75 kids. So it would cost $10 to give them all at least 1 bottle of water, $20, for 2, $30 for 3. So give them all 1 or 2. It's cheap as fuck. Water is cheap as fuck. So $10 for 100 bottles of water. $10 for 100 bottles of water just to make sure you don't have kids who die of dehydration on you. And if you're, giving them plenty of water, why not have a water fountain? Just have a water fountain in the middle of the damn facility that they could go and just, hydrate themselves. They can walk up, put them in handcuffs, but make sure that they can't run out or whatever, no entrance or exits. Once the entrance and exits are sealed, then just, hell, you could even probably just let them walk around. I don't know. Maybe you don't want them to bum rush you. There's only 4 of them, 163 of you. But you definitely can hand out bottles of water to each and every person. And that water fountain in the middle of the thing, maybe we don't have to give them caviar and, just a nice big old, a cornucopia of food, but we could just give them a little, some crackers, some cheese and crackers, some anything, a little peanut butter, anything. So I feel like that's the kind of American that I am. So that's the kind of Border Patrol that I want. Yeah, make sure you get the border. I get what you're doing. But you can't be fucking psychos. You can't lose your humanity, and you can't let the kids die on you. If you capture them and they die on you, it's your fucking fault. You did something wrong. So we need to listen to each and every one of these Border Patrol agents, find out who did it, who didn't do it, what could they have done better, and then fix these policies. We're going to get justice for Jakelin. We're going to get justice for Jakelin because this shit's bullshit. Now, we're not going to forget about Jakelin. She's a little brown girl, 7-year-old Guatemalan. It'd be easy to forget her, right? Racist white America. It'd be so easy to forget about her. So, and let's not forget that the Department of Homeland Security is one of the departments that Donald Trump has shut down. So perhaps, you know, with the FBI relaxing the background checks with the FBI when it comes to the Americans who want to apply for to adopt one of these migrant kids, and then he's he's pledged $6 billion for that Obrador plan for immigration with Guatemala and Honduras.